Hi, I'm Doug O'Brien. Welcome back to the Essential Coaching Skills podcast. My guest today is Denise Manning-Keys-Page, who is the founder of Ubuntu Storytellers, which is an ensemble of story artists who identify as having Black or Brown ancestry. She's also the co-producer of Women Tell by the Decades with Jen Monroe. So we're really excited to have her as a featured performer at the Woodstock Storytelling Festival coming up in just a couple of weeks in Woodstock, New York on October 24th, 25th, and 26th. So with no further ado, let's get this show on the road and hear from Denise. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills podcast. Hey, Denise.
Hi, good to see you, Doug.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for coming. You're coming from your home in Connecticut, I understand.
Yes, delighted to be here.
Good, good. No, we're not too far away. I'm upstate New York. I'm not far from Woodstock. So
okay. I'm looking forward to being in Woodstock.
It's going to be great. It's really going to be great. I'm so excited and so excited to hear your work. I was reading your bios and all the work you've done, and oh my goodness gracious, it's just so impressive. What can you tell us that and we only have an hour.
I'm glad you said that.
So keep it short. What can you tell us about Ubuntu Storytellers, if you don't mind?
Well, I can tell you about Ubuntu, and I can tell you how I came into storytelling. I think yeah. So the short story of how I came into storytelling, I like to say it was divinely inspired. It really was. I started telling because a friend I loved dearly, who was at the edge of her journey with ALS, said to me, "You should be a storyteller," which of course was not the first time I had heard that. But I thought, as a promise to her, I'll honor that and I'll participate in this it was a community storytelling event where you could actually read and take notes. You have to be a real storyteller. So I did it for her. And a few months after that, 6 months after that, I was at an event where three different people came up to me and said, "You don't know me, but I was there when you told that story, and I've been thinking about it ever since." And I thought, hey, maybe Jean was right. Maybe I should be. So fast forward, I went to a few workshops. I found a place in New Haven that was doing workshops, and I went, and they were preparing for Telebration. And I said, well, I'll do the workshops, and if anybody thinks I'm good enough, then I'll tell in Telebration. So I told in Telebration. Afterwards, and this is why Ubuntu Storytellers was formed. Now, I want you to keep in mind, I told one story the real way. Okay, the first time I had notes, but one story the real way in Telebration. And afterwards, it was mostly a white audience. And afterwards, people said to me all the things you would want to hear as a new storyteller. You were wonderful, story was so good, all of that. But they also said things like, now, why were you there again? Like, why was I where? Well, you said you were in this beach community. Like, yeah, well, I also said that's where I lived. And so what occurred to me is that things hadn't changed that dramatically since the 1960s when I was raised in suburban Connecticut, that people were amazed then that that's where I lived. And I said, here we are all these years later, and people still having difficulty wrapping their brain around. We live everywhere. We have always lived everywhere. We live everywhere in all different ways and way. And so at that moment, literally, what I call the divine whisperer said, you need to form an ensemble of storytellers who claim Black and Brown ancestry and tell contemporary stories of being Black and Brown in the States. And that's how Ubuntu Storytellers was born. But I want you to hear, I told one story and said, we're going to form a troupe and I'm going to get accomplished story artists that have been doing this forever to follow me. And you know what? They did. So that's how it started.
So cool. Tell me just for the benefit of our listeners, you said you told one story the real way.
Oh, yes. I mean, as we do as storytellers without notes, people often think, oh, you read to children, or they'll say to me, oh, did you make your speech yet? I think, no, storytelling is an art form where we tell whatever the genre is, we tell the story out of experience in the moment. We don't, so that's what I meant. I told story as a storyteller as opposed to the first time where I did some free form and also had notes, which no notes in the real world. Yeah.
The real world of storytelling. Yeah, and that's one of the things that's I think really great about storytelling is that it is, telling you a story, not reading you a book. There's no thing between us here. It's like we're communicating, and whether it's us over a cup of coffee or whether we're doing a performance or whatever, it's still in the present moment. And I think
Absolutely.
you froze.
And that's what draws me to it is the connection that it's such a deep connection so immediately. And again, the genre uh, in the hands of an accomplished storyteller, the genre is inconsequential. That bond is formed, that mutual reciprocity is there, regardless of genre.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
only personal narrative because that's how I came into it. So I only tell personal narrative contemporary. But I have such respect for those who do the gamut of storytelling when it's done artfully. It is a person to person connection.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's one of the things I think is going to be very interesting about this festival is that
Uh-huh.
there are, I assume, multiple different genres. I don't actually know, frankly,
Yes.
but having read people's bios and having them on this podcast, a lot of different genres of storytelling.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's gonna be
Yeah,
rich storytelling. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
cool.
Really looking forward to it. And I've had the pleasure, a lot of the storytellers I've either been in conferences or festivals with them or heard them at some point and have
How long
learned
have
so much
how
from
long you been doing this?
how
How
long
long?
storytelling?
Yeah.
November 2019 was when I told my first story, and that was the moment that I formed Ubuntu Storytellers. So yeah, it was November 2019 celebration. And then of course, the pandemic hit. And but I had decided that day, that first time that I told, that I was going to do this. And the pandemic, and I always feel a little sensitive about saying this because so many people had such horrible outcomes as a result of the pandemic. But I can say that I had some blessings as a result of the pandemic.
Mhm.
And that doesn't make me not aware of all the horrors of it. But one of the blessings was storytelling went virtual. And so I got to meet people in the storytelling world where I may not have met yet, but because things were virtual. So people who had been doing it a long time. It's how I was able actually to form Ubuntu Storytellers because I'd see somebody virtual and I just say, "Hey, I'm doing this thing. You want to come do it with me?" And so it really was a blessing, and I was able to take a lot of classes virtually, which would not have been offered virtually in
Mhm.
half the time. So I'm
Yeah.
very new in storytelling. Yeah, yeah, I'm a novice.
Is Ubuntu storytelling still an online thing, or?
We perform mostly live. Uh,
Uh-huh.
yeah, mostly live. We do sometimes if the client pays for it, we do hybrid. But yeah, but it's mostly live. We often do it. It depends again on the client. Sometimes we just do the storytelling show, which is it's 5 to 6 storytellers. Sometimes we do the show in Q&A. And sometimes my previous work is in the old days, it was called a diversity consultant, but currently I'm a racial justice and equity consultant. And so often Ubuntu Storyteller Show is the first module of that work. So they'll hear a storytelling concert, and then me and other consultants that I've trained will hold workshops with the audience or the workplace. And the way that we would do it is unpack the stories that we heard, and we use that as our first launch point to talk about racial equity and justice.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
Can
And
you
of
give us?
course, that's not recorded to be able to protect people's confidences in the workshop.
Mhm,
Excuse me.
mhm. Yeah, no,
Allergies here in Connecticut.
tell me, can you give us a preview of what your story is going to be about with the Woodstock Story Festival?
Yes. So I'm doing 3 stories, and they all center on friendship. One of the things that has really annoyed me in the last 20 years or so is that there are these, okay, I won't use the adjective. I'll just say there are programs on television. They're called reality shows.
Mm.
Show these relationships with women that they call friendship. I'm like, in my whole life, I never had a friendship that remotely resembled any of the interactions between these women. I
Mm.
also have done a lot of work with young people in my time, both as a volunteer and as a professional. And I have seen that often young girls don't know what friendship is.
Mm.
And I have really been blessed with incredible friendships my whole life. And so these 3 stories are dedicated to friendships that I've had through the years. They're in tribute to women who have been friends, real sisters. And
Nice.
that's what the stories are. And so they span. One story takes place in high school, my senior year in high school. Another one is it goes over a period of time. It starts as like 9 or 10 years old, and then goes up to like college age. And the third one, which is the one I did for the Moth main stage, I'm actually that story starts with me as a grandmother on the beach with my granddaughter, the beach
Oh,
of my hometown, my childhood hometown. So
very cool.
yeah, thank
So
you.
tell us about that. I've been on the Moth stage. I did a story slam.
Ah,
I've done several story slams, but I won a story slam, so I'm supposed to
did
get on.
you?
Yeah, so I'm supposed to get on the grand slam stage someday. If they ever
Really?
follow through and call me for that. But you were on the main stage in New
Yeah.
Haven, which is pretty impressive, I must say. Um, that's
That
good.
happens. That's a question I get all the time. How did that happen?
So that's cool. So the story that you're going to be to, the third of the three stories, is the one you told on the main stage.
On the main stage, yes. It's
Very
also the very first story I told at Celebration.
Oh, it
Um,
is.
yeah, it's the
Has it
same story.
changed much since you first told it?
Not much. Yeah, a little bit, but not much.
Uh-huh.
Um, Started out maybe 15 years ago as a written story.
Uh-huh.
We all know I remember pushing back at this when I first heard this, but a good written story very rarely makes a good oral story. And I really pushed back at that. I thought, my writing is so beautiful and engaging. But I guess the people that did this before me knew better than I knew because
Yeah.
for sure my written story does not make a good oral story. And so the story that I tell has been reworked from that first written story. And so it hasn't changed much at all.
Well, how did
Primarily,
you
I'm sorry.
I said, how did you rework it? Did you work it on paper? Did you rewrite it?
Yeah,
How,
so it's interesting because depending on what story I do, my methods are different.
uh-huh.
Sometimes I tell the story and record it and then play it back and tweak it. And then sometimes I write. I The precise word is really important to me. And people's kind of response to my storytelling is they say she's a literary storyteller. And I
Uh-huh.
and so there are some words that I want just that word. I don't want to get on stage and call it the woods when I called it the forest. I want it to be the exact word. And so in those instances, I do write out, but then when I tell I'm visioning it, I'm not saying the written word. So, but to take it from the written story to the oral story, that was, just like writing in general. It's just a lot of cutting and editing and reworking and then saying it out loud so it sounds more like you're having a conversation than than
And
it's
then
written.
once you said it out loud and it sounds good, you write it down so you remember it.
Sometimes, and sometimes it's the reverse.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes I write it down and say it, and then and sometimes I just say it, and then so it really depends on the story. The story beach music The story beach music, one of the reasons it hasn't changed much in the telling is because it changed so much in the developing of it. It's a very painful memory for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could not, another thing about storytelling, they say we have to tell from our scars, not our wounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it was real. When I wrote it, it was too painful for me to ever have been able to verbalize it. But by writing it over and over and over and over and over and over, getting it ready for oral, that's when I finally got to the place that it's just a wound. It's not a scar. I'm not hemorrhaging on stage when I tell it.
Yeah. Good.
That is the story. The story is as the story is. It hasn't changed much at all. But it's lived within me for 25 years.
Now, I read in your bio
Uh-huh.
because I've been very curious about the people that are coming to the Woodstock Story Festival, and of course, in preparing for this interview, I wanted to know a little bit about you. But I read in your bio that you're working on a new trilogy called "Legacy of a Wealthy Slave,"
Exactly.
which is a headline from the New York Times that references your great great grandfather.
Yes.
says in your bio that he patented an invention in 1886 with its resultant revenue sent two sons to Yale University.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
pretty amazing. So you're working on charges with that. Could you tell us about
Yes.
that?
Yeah. And excuse me one second, these allergies. I'm sorry. Um, I've had,
I'll take you
excuse
off
me.
camera for a second. Okay, I'll take you off. So we'll be back in a minute with Denise. By the way, if you haven't liked or subscribed, you can do that because that really helps us a lot. So we really appreciate you helping. And we'll be back just a moment. Okay, I think she's ready. Here we go.
Ready. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So many things fascinating about that, and I'll make this brief. One of
No,
the
no, take that time all you want. I want to hear
other
all about
dangerous, well, one of
this.
the often requested stories is when I mentioned that the first time I told I had notes and stuff, and
Hmm.
that story was a story called Mariah. That story is a story told to me by my mother. It's one of the few stories she ever told me about her childhood. The
Oh,
reason being, my mother was orphaned by the age of 7. Her
oh,
father died of tuberculosis and her mother of breast cancer
oh God.
within 6 months of one another. Her
Ugh.
father, she was 7, she knew this much. She knew her father had attended Yale Art School, 1913 to 1915. I would ask her questions like, how did he know he could go to Yale and like where'd the money come from? She didn't have the answers to any of that. She knew he had gone. He also had a studio on State Street in New Haven. And he, like many many artists, he supported himself by doing practical work, sign painting, as
Mm,
opposed to
mm,
fine art. And she used to visit him in his studio on State Street before he died. And so that's what we knew about my mother. We knew that about her paternal side. We knew her mother was Narragansett Indian from Rhode Island. That piece we knew. But
cool.
anyway, we didn't know this other piece. And so January 25th, 2024, I get an email from a young man I know. I knew both his parents and my parents went to the same church. And that's only relevant because if he did not have a relationship with me, I still would not know this information. He was working as a fellow at Yale Beinecke Library, Museum and Library, on the book that David Blight published called Yale and Slavery. And the research was based on looking for the ways that Yale benefited from enslavement.
Hmm.
And in that work, they discovered a black family who had sent 3 people to Yale. One had graduated in 1880, one in 1881, and one in 1915. And they all had the same name, Manning. And so Chaz is what I call him. When he reached out to me, he's like, Mrs. Page, what's your mother's maiden name, Manning? And I said, yeah, it's my middle name. He said, do you know anything about anybody in your family going to Yale? I was like, yeah, my grandfather went to Yale. And he's like, oh my God, oh my God. So then he throws out all this information. And for
Wow.
the first time in my life, I'm 70 at the time. The first time in my life, I find out where the southern roots of my mother's family began. Because my great 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 grandfather was enslaved in Edenton or Edenton, North Carolina.
Ah,
He purchased his freedom. He worked as a shipbuilder when he wasn't working as a slave. And with that money that he was able to keep, he purchased freedom for he and his wife. There's an amazing story about how they put my great great uncle John Wesley. He was a stowaway. That's a story for another time, but it's fascinating. And then ultimately my great great grandfather and his wife and the rest of his children come to New Haven, which is where John Wesley had been stowed away to because my great great grandmother had family here. When he got here, my Alfred, his name was, he patented this invention in 1866. And the invention allowed boats to dock on the Quinnipiac River in New Haven for the first time ever, which is what allowed them to have the oyster trade, which is what enriched
oh,
Fairhaven, Connecticut.
my God, for
And he
sure.
patented that in 1866. And then with the money he made, he sent one son to Hopkins Day School. He got a private tutor in art for the other son. And that's the one he went to Yale Art School, as my grandfather did. And he sent both sons to Yale and paid for this in the 1870s something. He paid for his 2 sons to go to Yale, which is
Wow.
why I understood why my grandfather understood, like he could go to Yale. He had uncles who had already done that. So what I'm researching is more about Alfred, the man who I keep saying This was a man who was enslaved. And all that time, he never lost vision or hope. And it's the first time, and I say this in my series, the first time that I understood that people who were enslaved, their dream wasn't to be free from, it was to be free to be.
Hmm.
And when he was free to be, he had enough sense to know that patent he had in his head, no way he was doing anything with that in North Carolina. Okay. When he got to Connecticut, however, he knew that there was a U.S. patent office, but I have a copy of the patent. I actually have
Nice.
a copy of the patent from
Oh,
so that's my hero. And it's my mom is no longer with us, but I know she knows. I just think what it would have meant to her to have known this when she was alive. And she was a proud woman who valued education without that knowledge. So
but that's so interesting. 'Cause, that's the story, isn't it? That's the story of your family, the story of your history. It's a story. Stories are so powerful,
yes, yes,
and as you say, genres aside, there's something about like a true story.
yeah, yeah.
There's something about that that just like, oh my God,
Well, when
it's
Chad contacted me, he said, "Mrs. Page, this is so meant to be because you're a storyteller. Like, who else was supposed to get the
yeah,
story? You're a storyteller." And I thought, yes, I'm a storyteller, and I've always been the keeper of the family stories, sparse as they were. So, so
nice.
that makes sense.
Cool. No, it's fantastic. And it just seems like, oh my God, now that you know that, you can open up so many other stories
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Go away, person, yeah. Mhm.
It's also just one quick thing. It also has brought to my life cousins that I never knew I had.
Right, I'm
And
sure.
and this side of the family, because they weren't orphaned generationally, they knew this history. And in fact, one of them just graduated from Yale this year.
Oh, no
And
kidding.
so I think she's the fifth generation. But one set of these cousins, Walt and his wife Darlene, who live in the DC area, which is my daughter where she is, they just immediately embraced me and were cousins that never spent a moment together before a year ago, and they're just so near and dear and valued by me. And they have documentation of all this history because their father and grandfather they all lived to pass it on. But yeah, yeah, their grandmother just the grandmother's name of these cousins is Yale.
No way.
And she's the daughter of John Wesley, who graduated in 1880. And the word is the family history, and the Yale history says that class of 1880 said when, or maybe 80 or 81, they made an agreement that the first of them to have a child would name that child Yale, whether it was male or female. And so rumor has it John Wesley had the first child from that class and he named her Yale. So that's my cousin's great great grandmother. So obviously they had all that history because she was named after it. But
That's fantastic.
yeah.
Cool.
Thank you for asking about that. And
Oh, no, it's
I like
fascinating. That's great. Yeah. So, a lot of my history and some of the other people that are doing this Woodstock Story Festival I come from a place where we tell therapeutics,
yeah.
um, Ericksonian hypnosis type thing. Me and Peter are both doing that, and I think a few other people are trained in Ericksonian hypnosis as well, where
Yeah.
the stories are told from the storyteller to the listener for a reason. There's a therapeutic
Hmm.
learning from the story, and I think
Yeah.
most stories have that to an extent. You
Yeah.
know,
They do for me. Yeah.
yeah, that there's a message in the story that you're wanting to get across. How do you
Yes.
ensure that the message gets across in your stories? Do you do like an Aesop's fable thing at the end where you say, "And the moral of the story is it?" No.
No. It's interesting you should say that because I actually teach a workshop. And the workshop is, I call it getting to your essential story.
Perfect.
And
Go.
in that workshop, the whole workshop is based on asking why at every level. Why are you telling this story? Why does it have meaning to you? What stands out? Why does that thing that has meaning to you have meaning to you? Why, right? And
Right.
drilling down. And that is my process in storytelling. So our life is full of anecdotes, moment by moment, right? And
Yeah.
so we get ready to tell a story. A story can start out feeling like these 7 things that happen peripherally are connected to this story, and you've got to get them all in there to tell the story. But then you realize, no, if you know why you're telling the story and you eliminate all that stuff, then the thing that you want people to connect to connects because they're not distracted by all these other things. But
Yeah.
I find I'm working on a story now where I'm having that challenge. I want to tell all these other things that really help you understand who this person is. And I realize the more I tell about them, the less they'll know who the person is. So I have
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get down to what is the one reason you're telling this story.
That's
And then
great.
you tell this one thing about that character and they'll get it. But that's my process. And so far, fair success, amount of success.
Pretty
So
good. Yeah, you're doing okay.
learning ground. Yeah, I work on it all the time. Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you know Matthew Dix?
I'm sorry, you
Do you know
broke up.
Do you know Matthew Dix?
Peripherally, I'm going to his show Saturday.
Who are you?
And we've been in shows at the same time. We've never been on stage at the same time. We've been in shows produced by the same person. So
Okay.
he's the slammingest winner of all time. And
I know. He's won more slams than anybody. And
yeah,
what show is he doing this weekend?
maybe it's Speak Up. And
Okay. Oh
I
yeah.
I
Oh yeah.
really think it's
Speak up.
that,
Yeah.
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 And, yeah, it's Matthew Dix, and then a newcomer to storytelling who, um, we've become friends. Chris Bell is telling that night, and he has started. He's very new to storytelling, and he's won a couple of slams already, and I think he won a grand slam. So I'm really looking forward to Saturday. I have a friend that came up from DC to go. I turned
Nice.
her on to storytelling, and she can't get enough. And she's a social worker, and she wants to use it in her practice.
There you
So
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
I teach classes on how to do that.
yeah.
Fantastic. So yeah, that's so cool that you're going to see Matthew Dix.
So
Recently,
you know Matthew.
because he wrote the forward to my book. Matthew wrote the forward to my book.
Did he really? Okay.
Yeah.
I look forward to that. Yeah. So
Yes.
I'll get your book when I come to
He
Woodstock.
also gave me a credit for helping him get his show, the You're a Monster, Matthew Dix, to be produced. He gave me a credit.
Wow. Well, I'll have to name drop Saturday.
Yeah, say hello
I
from
you.
me.
Yeah. Wonderful. I love that you have that connection.
Yeah, it's
Yeah. No,
great.
I haven't met him one to one yet, but they're really interesting. We've been like satellites. So
But the
yeah.
reason I ask is that, yeah, he's won a lot of the story slams. And one of the things that happens in for me when I prepare a story for the Moth, because the Moth stories in the story slams have to be 5 minutes,
Right.
just a 5 minute story. So usually my story will start out about 15 minutes or
Yeah.
so. When I actually say, okay, let me try this out and say it out loud, it's like, holy crap, it's so then I have to start cutting and slashing and cutting. And that's where we talk about what you were saying, that cut out all these peripheral things that aren't really
Yeah.
the point to the story. Like, why are you telling the story? And
Right.
Matthew had this great way of describing how every story has to have a 5 second minute, second moment.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
the point to the story, is that 5 seconds.
Absolutely. Well, I will tell you around here, I quote that and I credit him when I quote it. I have his book. And Jen Monroe, who I don't know if you know, she's a Circle of Excellence winner and
Oh,
awardee. And when she teaches, she says, you have Matthew Dixon, she names the book story worthy in the 5 second moment. And so yeah, it has had a lot of impact. But it does, it helps you crystallize this is the story. All this other stuff is they're I find they often become stories later. They're other stories.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Uh,
Neat.
uh,
Very cool. So your stories have why, and that can be therapeutic, but that's not why you're not doing it to be therapeutic for, like in a Ericksonian hypnosis story, but
Here's why I do it. Um, to the reason that I started Ubuntu Storytellers was to widen, broaden, and deepen the menu of stories about Black and Brown people. I mean, it's just that simple. that, as far as in my world, what I've experienced is three tropes about Black people. Are either the victim, the aggressor, or what I call the super Negro. And that super Negro was born with no feet, one ear. Their dad was missing, and their grandmother was a crack addict, and he went to Harvard, and he graduated from law school cum laude. So those are the three stories: victim, aggressor, and super Negro. All three are true, like as they are in any culture.
Yeah.
But the basic things, like I said, that first story I told when people, I would tell you anecdotally. One time, I mentioned that I do this anti-racism leadership development, and one of the exercises we do is they've heard the stories live, and then I have questions for each story that in small groups people respond to. And one group told me this particular day, they were highly embarrassed. We loved your story. You're such a good storyteller, but we couldn't answer the questions. And I said, like you didn't know the answers or you didn't know how to get. No, we just couldn't answer them because the questions were about being Black and or our awareness of Blackness or race, and your story wasn't a Black story. And I said, well, okay. So who told the story? Well, you did. You do know I'm Black, right? Yeah. Did I neglect to say that it's a personal narrative, true story? No, you said that. So why wasn't it a Black story? And I thought if I ever needed confirmation about why I do, none of the things you expected to hear, because it's a story about it, none of those things emerged for you. So it wasn't a Black story. So that's what I do in all of my stories. They're my life story, but the stories of my life, but I tell them, and it's interesting because all of my tellers in Ubuntu Storytellers have said to me, or will say to me many times over and over, I never knew there was a place to tell these stories. I always have these stories in me, but whenever we're talking about like Black people or Black Latino people, like they're talking about something else. There was just never a place to tell the story of my life before. And I thought, and you may be familiar with the movie An American Fiction, which came out last year, I think.
Yeah.
And as soon as I heard about it, I said, "This is Ubuntu Storytellers." That whole story is, and so that's why I tell.
Nice.
That's why I tell the stories I tell, I should say. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank
Well,
you.
gosh, I'm so looking forward to meeting you in person. It's going to be so much fun.
Guys, yeah, I can't wait. Maybe allergies. I used to be horribly allergic to that part of New York.
Allergic to this part of New York. What do you
Yeah,
mean?
my ex-husband and I were going to buy property there, and I was so swollen by the time we finished. It's like,
Really?
I don't think you can live here. And I've been there since, and it's calmed down a little. But I was going to say maybe I won't be this swollen and drippy by then. But then I thought, where I'm going, maybe I will be.
Maybe it's the time. Maybe it's the time of year. Maybe it's a seasonal thing.
Yeah, oh, it was definitely seasonal. Yeah, it was.
Hopefully, it'll be fine. Hopefully, you'll very much enjoy it. Want to come back next year and
Oh
do this.
yeah, absolutely.
So, just real quick, if people want to get hold of you, they go to what are your websites?
Probably Denise Keys Tells is the best one,
Denise
and it's
Keys.
Denise Keyes Tells. Ubuntu Storyteller. Somehow the emails don't always get to me, but Denise Keys Tells it does.
Okay.
Or email, which is Denise K Page Page, no I, at Gmail.
Okay. Good.
Page, the common noun. So, I say keys is the uncommon noun because we have an E, and page is the common noun without an I. So,
Very nice. Very good. Okay. So, yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. We'll be seeing you in a couple of weeks. The Woodstock Story Festival is October 24th, 25th, and 26th, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in Woodstock, New York. And we'll certainly have in the program notes ways that you can get hold of the Woodstock Story Festival. So to see Denise Manning-Keys-Page, did I get it right?
You got it right.
In person, and me too, and other people as well. So we'll all be there. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Peter. You're some great ducks. Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye. This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here,
It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.